Hello everyone, this is Chidanand from Kratz Infotech NG. Welcome to this tutorial on Docker Volume. What I plan to do is demonstrate the usage of something called as a volume, which is nothing but a folder that can be set out as a volume by any of the containers, and this folder can be used for sharing data across containers or between container and the underlying host VM. I will end it up by doing a small demo where I will use an image of a publicly popular tool called Jenkins, where these images have been configured in, or rather built in such a way that they all write the configuration data or the live data or the production data into a specific folder well within the containers that they run. So if in case you use Docker volumes to back up these folders well within the container and make them available across the cluster, even in case of a failure of a running container, how easy it is to back up and restore from this particular volume. For my demo, I'm going to use my Windows desktop on which I have a Linux subsystem that I've installed. And let me bring up this Linux subsystem where I have Docker installed. So I'm just going to need two different shells, just because, I want to do something right inside the container and then possibly use the other shell to showcase how does it look like outside the container. All right, I'm at a particular location out here on my desktop. So if at all I say Docker, I see Docker engine up and running. If I say Docker version, I have the version of Docker that is running, which is 20.10. Now, let me spin up a container using Alpine. So Docker run -itd. -v is what can be specified for bind mounting any existing folder on your particular machine to a folder right inside your container. So this is the first way of coming up with something called as a volume, which is called a bind mounting of a local folder. So I'm going to use, let's say, pwd, which is nothing but the present working directory. And let me create a folder there called anand-data and link it to anand-data well within the container. And what do you want to run? I want to run Alpine, and I want to run shell within my Alpine. All right. So Docker container comes up, Docker attach. I want to attach to my container, which is called cranky, some weird name. And if at all I see the folders, I would find my folder right out here. So this is the folder that is linked to outside my container as a volume. So if I write something here, okay, echo hello from the container, and maybe write it to a file called hello.txt. Now this is well within this Anand data, but Anand data is linked to this particular folder, which is present working directory under a folder called Anand data. So if at all I go here, which is outside my container, and I search for Anand data, you will find this folder that got created. So if I go to Anand data, possibly see the same file that got created from well within the container. Now this is the simplistic use case of container creating a volume. Now the vice versa is also true, where again depends on the operating system and the kind of permission that is set out. Sometimes this folder is kind of controlled by the root access, so you will need root access to write anything. So if at all I write a file from outside the container as well, so let me try to do that. Hi from outside the container, right? And I say outside.txt or some weird name, right? I have these two files here. Now the same thing would get reflected here as well. If I see outside. So in short, a volume is nothing but a folder that can be put out. You can link any folder that is available on your local machine and make that available inside your container by mounting it to any particular folder of your choice well within the container. This folder acts like a data store where whatever is written from inside the container as well as from outside the container all goes out here. And then this folder can also be used by multiple containers. That's the simplistic use case of something called as volumes. But the real power of volume comes into play when you have some tools, any of these popular middleware tools that you run as containers. These tools, the images of these tools are built in certain way where all the production data, right from the time you bring up this particular tool, all the data that goes in, let's say if you bring up a MySQL database, from the time the MySQL database comes up, if you create some files, if you create some users, if you create some tables, whatever you create well within that particular container, which can be viewed like a production data or the production configuration, all this gets written into this folder. Now, if I link that folder, which is well within the container, to a folder that is shared on my local machine, maybe using some sort of a centralized file system storage, be it an ABS, be it a block storage or an NFS mount, and then in case the container goes down as well, I could spin up another container, use the same image, and then override the folder with whatever live data that I have, thereby backing up my production workloads. I've removed those containers or removed that container which I had started. I no longer need that. Now let me take a look at how do I run Jenkins, and that too by specifying something called as a volume. So if I go to hub.docker.com, this is where I will find all kind of popular images, the official images. Let me take a look at Jenkins and the documentation available for Jenkins. All right. So here it very, very clearly tells me how to start Jenkins and also how to link a particular volume. It also highlights the use case where all the Jenkins data is stored in a folder right inside the container, which is called /var/Jenkins home. Now this is the default folder that is created and used by the official Jenkins image. So in case I want to back up my data, what Jenkins recommends is create something called as a Docker volume. Okay, and it very clearly says do not do a bind mount. The bind mount is not recommended just because the file permissions need to be modified. Anyway, I showed you how to bind mount a particular volume. So let me go and create something called as Docker managed volumes. So Docker volume create any name that I want. I'm going to give Jenkins-data. I just create a volume and Docker volume ls just to see if it's present, and then Docker inspect Jenkins-data. This will tell me where exactly is this volume created as compared to where exactly in which folder on this virtual machine is this volume located. In the bind mount, we get to kind of mount any particular folder of our choice. But out here, when you ask Docker to create the volume, it by default goes ahead and creates this volume in var lib Docker. All right. So that's the big difference between bind mounts and mounting, or rather Docker managed volumes. All right. So let me go ahead and copy this and maybe make a little bit of a change. All right. So this is the command. My volume name is Jenkins-data. I can change this, but I should not change the other one. And one port is enough for me. I don't want, this is the port for the agents. I don't want that. Maybe I don't want this restart on failure as well. Okay. What I try to do is I will just give an -rm option so that after the container comes up, for some case, in case I stop the container gets into an exited state, after which the container automatically gets removed. All right. So I'm trying to run a container which is powered by Jenkins and Jenkins/Jenkins:/LTS JDK11 exposing port 8080, and whatever configuration, starting from the time I start my Jenkins, all that which gets written to this particular folder is kind of backed up by linking it to my volume that I've created. All right. And okay, I don't want this detached mode. Maybe let me run it in the foreground mode itself. All right. And yeah, this is good enough. I don't want to give a name for my container. All right. So let me see if I can spin up a container using this command. Right. It's not able to find that image. And in the meanwhile, let me check because I've mapped port 8080. Let me check if I have something running on my local host 8080. I may have my Windows Jenkins running. If that is the case, let me go and stop it. Right. So let me stop this. I don't want this Jenkins because automatically it is running. I would want my Jenkins from the container to come up. All right. So there's nothing on my 8080. Okay. So, Jenkins started running. Probably didn't encounter any error. And it gives me something called as an admin password. Okay. So let me copy that. And if at all I were to do a sneak preview or sneak peek at what exactly is this data stored, because all these are coming out in as a log file. Okay. So now if I say docker inspect Jenkins -data, this is the folder possibly where all this information, because this is a secret and possibly the secret and logs and everything should be in this particular folder. So if I do an ls and copy this folder, all right, sudo ls okay, you see now all the files, whatever, once the container comes up, whatever files that is rendered, whatever files that is required, whatever the files that is created, everything is actually getting written into this folder, which is nothing but the volume that we have mapped and mounted into our particular container. So let me go ahead by installing Jenkins. So before that, let me just copy this stuff. And if I do a localhost 8080, all right, let me give you the exact IP config. Oops, if config. Okay, so this is the IP address of my machine, of my WSL that is running as a Linux machine, and then :8080. All right, so this is where my Jenkins throws up the initial login page where I need to copy this and then pass it here. No, don't save this. All right, so my Jenkins installation started. As and when the installation is going through, whatever configurations, whatever data that is being kind of produced by well within the container gets written into var Jenkins home folder, which is mapped to my volume. So I don't want to install any plugins. I'll probably, I'll just say none. I don't want to install any plugins because plugin installation usually will take a lot of time. So I'm going to create some username and password for the default user of Jenkins. And right, my Jenkins comes up. So these data is written into the var lib or rather var Jenkins home, and this Jenkins has been kind of powered by my container. So let me create a job, a simple job, hello world job kind of a thing. It's a freestyle project. Since I've not installed any plugin, I will not see too many options, but that's all right. As a build step, let me execute shell. I will just say echo hello world and possibly print out the date stamp. All right, and let me do a build now. Okay, the build actually ran, and if I see the console output, okay, so now everything inside the container is being written into this particular folder. Okay, so I have a Jenkins that is running, I have a Jenkins that is configured, and Jenkins which has got an admin user password, and also one job that I've already put up. Now, whatsoever reasons, if this Jenkins gets killed, all right, so let's kind of try to do that. Docker ps, docker stop. I'm just going to emulate a failure, or rather I'm going to simulate a failure where for some reasons this container goes down. All right, then if I do a docker ps, this container is not present. All right, ps minus a, the name of the container that just went down is called youth, some name, FERMAT. But if at all I look out here, I don't find any image, or rather any container that has just went down. Nothing for sure with the name youth format. That's just because I gave a -rm, remove the container. So though I stopped the container totally disappeared. So I've kind of simulated a failure and a crash. So though my container went down, I have all the configurations. I have all the configurations that I need, which are backed up in this particular folder, right? If we do an ls of that particular folder, all right, all my data, all my configuration is present in this folder. Now, in case I start another Jenkins, a container powered by Jenkins, the idea is that this particular volume should be across machines. And if there is one machine that goes down, any other machine where this volume is available can also emulate and give you back exactly the same container that went down. Since I do not have too many machines, I'm going to use the same machine to come up with the same, I'll use the same configuration. But the assumption is you notice that my old container, which was this, has totally gone down. So I'm going to spin up another container. All right. And then I'm going to link the same volume Jenkins data to that particular container. All right. And then maybe I don't want to give RM option here. And, let me just start this particular container. All that I want to demo is that wherever my previous Jenkins left off with whatever state it was running, you pretty much get the same configuration in the newer Jenkins that will come up. Now, if you see, there's nothing here just because my Jenkins has crashed. I thought I lost everything, but let me try to run this again. And now a new container comes up. If at all, I'll take a look at what is the name of my container, docker ps. It's some other container. Okay, this guy is much more relaxed. Okay, so this container comes up, but the data from the previous container is superimposed or put as an overlay on top of the var Jenkins home, right? So now Jenkins is up and running. If at all I refresh this, all right, I don't get the installation page because whatever previous installations was done, not just that, whatever job was also run, exact state of my previous Jenkins is stored. Since I backed it up using my volume, I can get back all that data. Admin, and this is the password. Okay, see here now, same job that was run a while ago is still present. The same dashboard with the same user. So assuming that I had a big heavy Jenkins server that was running with a lot of data configurations, plugins available on it, just by backing up the volume to a folder which probably is there across my cluster, even if I lose my Jenkins, I can restore it in no time. That is the power of volumes. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial, and as usual, if anybody wants to try this out and if you run into any issues, kindly leave in a comment and I'll try to address it as soon as I can. Thank you so much for stopping and watching my tutorial. You have a great